Yes. Tonight's talk is based on the writings of Elder Porphyrius. Elder Porphyrius, as you probably know, I'm sure you know, was a priest monk in Athens at the hospital, a great ascetic, had the gift of clairvoyance. The whole thing about it is very special. And so I want to share what he wrote about creation. Elder Porphyrius says, all things reflect the beauty and the majesty of God. All things. And there's no exception. When we hear an expression like that, all things of God, we think, of course we think about nature. We think about a beautiful sunset, a starry night at night, the sky full of stars, heavens full of stars, constellations, universes within universes. It's endless. This is what we think, but Elder Porphyrius had a much broader vision of this, and the reason he had a vision of it is because he was inspired by God, by grace. He was given grace so that he was aware of what was happening around him and what things were and what things meant. He was always curious. He wanted to know what something was, the name of something. He wanted to know how things worked. He just did. That was part of his nature. And he learned this when he was a boy on the Holy Mountain. And so this was for him quite natural, except that the phenomenon that he witnessed was not natural. I give a rather bizarre example, is that he went to Hades. There's a cave in Greece. I don't know where it is. Maybe some of you know it. It's meant to be the entrance to Hades. And he went to this cave, and he went inside, and he came out and he said, "Do you realize Apollo is not a god?" That's what he said. What does it mean, you know? Apollo was not a god. No, we know what he was. He was a demon, but St. Paisius sort of knew about it. Also, they were going to look at a new church that was being built just outside Athens, and he's in the car, and he's looking out the window. He says, "Elder, look over there on the left, look on the left. There's a new church." And he's looking the other way. "Elder, it's over here on the left." He said, yes, I know about that, but I look at the one on the right. There's nothing there. Empty field. But there was a church. When they checked back later, they realized there was a church there in the 5th century. But he could see it. These are exceptional gifts, exceptional gifts. So when he looks at nature or something, or wants to acquire knowledge, he's one ahead already of most people, or all people in fact, as far as I'm concerned. He says, "Take delight in all things that surround us. All things teach us and lead us to God. All things are droplets, kaplia, of the love of God." All things. So he's looking at nature, but he's also looking at animate and inanimate objects. What's an inanimate object? A new church, a theatre, a new concert hall. How wonderful this is that people can do that and give thanks to God. Because the glory that you give to the person, the praise you give to the architect, is for God. Everything is for God. Animate and inanimate. Buildings, fragrances, paintings. I mean, the list is endless. Your favourite music, thinking of Bach and Handel in particular, but other composers. Paintings. If you're interested in art, I'm sure you are. Most people are. All these are to the glory of God. They don't have to be religious paintings. The music doesn't have to be part of the Mass, like Bach's writing for the Mass or Mozart. No, it's glory to God. It's music that is offered to God because it is composed by somebody that God created. Now, to me, this is very, very important, that God has created us. He created the earth. He's created the earth and the world for us. He created you and I individually. We don't come out of a mold. We're not all the same. You might say, well, somebody looks similar to somebody, maybe parents, but otherwise, no. Every person that is born, created by God, is unique. And they are created, here it comes, out of nothing. The universe is created out of nothing. It's not created out of some molten metal or various chemicals in the universe. They exist. Nobody says that they're not components of stars, but that's not where they came. The origin is nothing. Only God can will something into nothing. It's mind-blowing. Don't try and think about it. Let's move on. Let's move on to something we can handle. Okay. Now this is even more important. He says, for a person to be a Christian, he must have a poetic soul. Is that a judgment for us? For a person to be a Christian, must have a poetic soul. Because he says Christ does not want insensitive people around him. You have to be sensitive. How you do it, that's up to you, but that's what he says. And I've been thinking about this. To be a Christian is to be a poet, or at least to have the soul of a poet. And immediately what came to me was a couple of poems, actually. Well, one poem mainly, by John Keats, who was a British poet. And he wrote a famous sonnet called Ode to Autumn. It's very beautiful. When I looked it up and realized what he was saying, it starts off by saying, this is autumn, a season of mist and mellow fruitfulness. How many of us have seen the autumn, the fall? All of us, of course. It's a season of mist and fruitfulness. All the fruits are ready. This is how he describes autumn. And then he goes on to say, and still more later flowers for the bees, until they think that summer days will never cease, for summer has overbrimmed their clammy cells. You have anything to do with bees, you know that in the hive they're producing honey, they're putting it into the cells, they are sealing it, and sometimes they haven't got there yet when you're looking. I mean, I'm a beekeeper, so I'm opening the hive and looking inside. But there's all this honey oozing out. This is autumn. Amazing figurative poetry. It's one of my favourite poems, so I chose that. And another one which is a little bit humorous is William Blake, who I don't really approve of, by the way, personally, but he was a fine poet, but very peculiar. And he says, you see a thistle. What is a thistle? По-русски.
Расторопща.
No.
Репейник.
Репейник на расторопща.
What is it?
That's called, well,
A very spiky weed.
No, we'll have a look it up on the phone later. It doesn't matter. He says, you see a thistle, but I see an old man grey. And other poems and other verses he wrote. This is the soul of the poet. This is the soul of a Christian. Now, John Keats wasn't a Christian, but he's very close, extremely close in his beauty of nature and his writing. He had a tragic life, which I think helps. He was dying of tuberculosis, and eventually it took him the age of 23 or 24. So he didn't live very long. He lived in poverty, born in poverty, and that's how he lived. But he knew how to suffer. And I think that is also a little key to understanding these things spiritually, is when we suffer. Now, we're not masochistic, we're not looking for suffering, but we accept it when it comes and understand that that is a part of life. It is our cross. We need to be sensitive. We need to be sensitive. We need to love poetry. I'm not saying which poems you should read or which poet you should read. That's up to you. But to have some poetry in your soul, and I'm sure you do. I don't know anybody personally who would not be interested in poetry. Maybe not to read it or study it, but knows some verses. Yeah, even from a childhood we know things. They speak to us of the love of God. That's what they do, all these things, these phenomena, beautiful objects, flowers, summer, autumn. They speak of the glory and majesty and love of God. That's what they reflect. And that's what's so marvellous about them. Beautiful moments, says the elder, predispose the soul to prayer. So we see something beautiful, or we feel something beautiful, we hear something beautiful, it should inspire us to pray. Not to go and check our bank account or something mundane. Not that it's not important, of course it is, but it's these moments we need to be able to stop and think and pray. And prayer comes through contemplating beautiful things which are dedicated to God. They're dedicated to God because they are a part of Him. I don't mean pantheism by that we belong to, we're part of God, but no. But it's His world, is the world of love and care and beauty, beautiful fragrances. Beautiful moments predispose our soul to prayer. And Elder says, wake up in the morning to see the sun rising from the sea, as a king robed in royal purple. I'll repeat that. Wake up in the morning to see the sun rising from the sea as a king robed in regal purple. And I'm sure that you have your own pictures, imagination of that. Look at the sky. I remember as a child going to church in the evening, on a summer evening when the sunset and clouds and everything, and it looked like sand. And I used to imagine it was a desert. And I looked to see if there might be some camels. There weren't, not even cloud-shaped. So yes, it's how can you live without not having imagination? How can we live without the beauty that God has given us, and which reflects His love and His majesty? It's fantastic. I go out on the deck here on a starry night and look up at the sky. Endless stars. In New Zealand, we could walk around on our farm at night and see the stars, and they're different though. Everything's upside down, and there's no North Star, but there's a South Star. So we don't have that here.
No South Star. No South Star.
What is it called then?
Southern Cross.
Southern Cross, thank you. I stand corrected. I call it a star because I'm being poetical. All my mistakes are poetical, okay. We'll accept that. But nature cannot be a substitute for grace. It points to the Creator. It is not the Creator. If it was, then we would be pagans, we would be believing in the divinity of trees and whatever, and certain animals and rocks. And people do believe that. I don't know anybody personally, but that is a belief. Okay, it's good. Inanimate objects. Certainly with the Indian tribes here, they venerate all sorts of physical things, animate. Do they have poetry? Yes, of course they do. But I think I'm not going to start doing an analysis of Indian poetry because it's up to them what they do, but it's an expression of the love of God, even if they don't realise it. Though I think they do, but not as we realise it as Christians. That's the difference. Elder Porphyrius tells of a time he was going up on one of the mountains to set up something there for a water cistern. And on the way up he met this herdswoman, and she was bringing up a herd of I don't know what they were, cows I should guess. And they're walking together and talking. And Elder said, how are all, he said to her, how are all the beauties doing? What are you talking about? Well, how are the beauties doing? The meadows, the birds singing, the beautiful cloud formations. And she said, oh, I never noticed. Mm-hmm. He said, well, you need to notice. He said, well, I can't, I haven't got time for that sort of thing. And he was saying how sad that was, that response. She was a good woman. She worked hard, she fed her family, but she didn't have that feeling of that sensitivity that is required of a Christian, to be sensitive. So when you're going home tonight, I expect you to be looking at things, but keep your eyes on the road. For a person to be a Christian, he must have a poetic soul. And he said, "Are you sure? I mean, what about the butterflies? Now, have you heard the nightingales? Solevay. Have you heard them singing?" "No, I never noticed." "Well, why not? Well, I don't see anything. And I just got my job to do, move the cattle up the hill, up the mountain. Too busy to see things. That's sad." And he said, "But it's already May and everything should be in blossom." "Oh, well, maybe it is. I'm not sure," she says. And then she saw. Then as they walked, we saw these things. "What do you have to say now?" "I did not notice." We met birdsong. You're lying. The birds are singing. How can you say there is nothing there?" "That you didn't see it or thought about it?" "Yes." Now, he actually corrects her for that, because it's not good. And it's another thing actually which he mentioned. He said that I remember as a child seeing fossils which were a million years old, fossilized trees and trunks. And I was very impressed by that as a child, and said I always remember it to this day. This amazing phenomenon that God has created out of His love. All these things that we see, smell, hear, enjoy are droplets of God's love. I like that expression. Droplets of God's love. The person who has divine wisdom sees all things with love. Everything. I was thinking of a little bug once I saw somewhere, and it went across the table while we were sitting talking, and the person immediately put one like that and squashed it. And I said, "Well, what do you do that for?" "Well, it's a bug." There's nothing you can say. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to correct them, but I thought, that's sad. I don't believe in squashing bugs. I mean, if I'm attacked by a bird-eating spider, I mean, I'd run away, but that's not the issue. And I've worked with bees, and you get stung. It's a part of life, It's what you do when you keep bees, and it's good for you, they say, but it hurts every time. Very, very painful. Believe you me, if you're working with them. But everything, to me, I always think, well, I can't make a bee. I can't make one of these little bugs. If you look at it under a microscope, it's incredible architecture, engineering. Who's done that? Who's done the engineering for a flea? Blacha. Jubil blach karo kagdato. You know the song of the flea. But how can you make a flea? You probably can, but what sort of engineering is required? And wasn't it they made shoes for the flea? Actually, Hedda was wearing shoes. I mean, it's a song. It's a funny song, and it's a joke. But quite seriously, I think about that. I can't. I'm not going to squash something just because it's there. Okay, if it's going to attack me or attack somebody else, then yes, I would then do it, be reluctant. I always think, actually, I think of Saint Macarius the Great, or Saint Macarius over Egypt, the second Saint Macarius, and he was praying on the edge of a swamp, and he got stung by a mosquito bit him. So what did he do? Squash. And then afterwards he thought, what have I done? Now, he's a saint and a great ascetic. He said, well then, I should not have done that. Why am I killing this thing? It's not necessary. And you could flick it away. I know it would come back again, but the point is, you didn't have to kill it, but he killed it. And he felt really bad, so bad about it, that he went into the swamp to pray and stayed there for a week or so. When he came out, nobody could recognize him. His face was so swollen. Now, I'm not saying that we should do that. Heaven forbid, a mosquito bites you. It's painful, and we try and avoid it. But let's not. I don't know why I'm talking tonight about killing bugs. Don't kill them. Everything is precious. Don't break things. Don't smash architecture. Don't be negligent about looking after things. It's an attitude, not what you're doing, and it's not the end result. It's an attitude. So let us, by studying the things around us, and I wouldn't just say nature because that's not sufficient, and people, or in the image of God, this is wonderful. We should be looking at them, giving and thanks to God for the beauty, for the intelligence, personality of some people is very, very what do you call it? What's it, rewarding? Attractive. And some people have a very, particular type of personality. This is good. Give thanks to God. When we have wisdom, we are not worried by it, and we're certainly not judged by it, and we don't judge others. And he says it, and I'll finish on this note, he says that visible things that we see, what I've talked about tonight, are merely entrance to the holy temple. Now he's talking figuratively now, okay, because we are sensitive, we understand that, okay? It's poetic. He says what am I saying? Sorry. Visible things are merely the entrance to the temple and are themselves praiseworthy. Visible things that we see. This beautiful, this is praiseworthy, give thanks to God. But it's only when we look at something like that and think about it and want to pray, even better, it is only the beginning, it's only the entrance of the temple. We're standing in the entrance of the temple, being something divine, holy. We're standing in the entrance, but we're not in the Holy of Holies. And are we worthy? Now this is a thought. Are we worthy to look at these things? Do we look at them with an open mind? Bestest of all, if you can, do we look at things with love? Because Porphyrius says that if you look at something with love, you gain the wisdom. Now I don't know why he could see things in the past, but he did. God gave him that gift. He never explained anything like that. But so we'll think about that. And I shall think about that for the rest of my life and find out what it's about. I'll probably never know. I'm not looking for an answer. I'm not looking for an answer. I just think this is amazing. Gifts that God gives us. I may not have it, but other people do. You may have it. And you may have it and not even know you've got it. So visible things are merely the entrance to the temple and are in themselves praiseworthy and majestic. What is to be said of the Holy of Holies? And who is worthy to enter into the holy place? Who will stretch forth his gaze to that which is hidden? I like that one, that which is hidden. So we look at things, there's something hidden which we probably don't see immediately, but it's there for us to see if we want to. Can you switch off?